Well, students, what did you pick in that previous question? Did you pick to sell all your shares in ImClone stock before that news came out and the possibility of losing lots of money? Did you decide to hold on to that stock and see what happens because you're in it for the long run? Or did you run to the SEC? Well, if you sold your stock, you'd be in a lot of trouble. You should have run to the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. They are the stock police because the stockbroker that told you to sell those shares on information he got before it's made public for everybody else, what he has done is he has committed securities fraud, cheating in the market by using what they call insider information. And this is your lesson today on cheaters in the market. Some of the more famous cases in the 200 years of history in this country that we've had stock markets, 200 plus years. Okay. There's a look at the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. I'm going to pour a little sign down here that says, "Welcome to Cheaters in the Market." Anyway, moving on from that. So, your situation that I gave you about selling your ImClone stock was actually taken from real life. And it is a story about a very famous celebrity out there named Martha Stewart. You probably haven't heard from her. That's okay. She's a little older now, but in her day, she was a billionaire. And she had made a lot of money on things like decorating homes, baking, as you can see here. And people really liked what she did. And her company sold stock, making her a billionaire. She was really good at what she did. However, she's the one in this story. In real life, you'll see this in a little bit. I'll give you a video clip. This woman who everybody said was like the perfect homemaker, such a nice lady, used insider information to sell stock before it was made public that this ImClone, a real company at the time, had a cancer drug that was actually going to be, it was not approved. It was going to be denied by the FDA. And she sold her shares, saving her from losing money later on. The crazy thing about it is she would have only lost $46,000. She's a billionaire. I know. And so what happened was she went to federal prison for insider trading, spent 5 months there, and then 5 months in house arrest. So if you do cheat in the market, it doesn't matter who you are, even a nice lady like that, you're going to go to prison. So insider trading is one of the ways to cheat in the market. And what it is basically, as I said before, somehow you're getting information before everybody else gets to hear that information, before it's made public. And you can benefit from this. Either you hear some good news, you're like, oh yeah, I want to buy something before that news comes out. Or you get bad news like Martha Stewart and you decide to sell and get out before everybody else also hears about it. See, here's what Martha Stewart did if you don't get it. She sold all her shares to other people who bought those shares. And she knew full well that bad news was coming. So she really kind of cheated those people. And you got to understand that when people invest, we're talking, this is trillions of dollars. This is like the biggest thing out there in regards to our economy. And it does involve a lot of trust. And when things like this happen, you break people's trust. Cheating in the market's nothing new. It goes all the way back to the beginning. The middle picture there you see is supposedly a picture of the signing of what was known as the Buttonwood Agreement, which created the New York Stock Exchange as we call it today. Those guys you see in the picture, they were all traders at that time, much smaller scale than what you see today. But this is how it began in the later part of the 1700s in New York City, in our country. This man here, William Dewar, was one of the first big cheaters in the market, and he created the panic of 1792 when the stock market was just brand new. And what he did was he had some kind of a scheme where he was just borrowing tons of money from anybody he could borrow money from. Anybody. And he was using that money just to buy stocks in some of the companies that were around at the time. Well, when you buy, what it does is it attracts attention and also gets people excited, and stock prices begin to go up. The thing is, though, it was all money he was borrowing. Eventually, it caught up to him, and he wasn't able to pay back some of his people that had lent money to him, and he ends up getting in trouble and going to prison, where he dies later on. He's not the only one, of course. In the 19th century, there were all kinds of scandals, and here was a famous one from the mid part of that century, back when railroads were new. A man named Robert Schuyler had a plan where he secretly printed up $2 million worth of shares to sell to investors. The problem was the shares didn't really exist. He just kind of made it up. He didn't have the authorization to do it. Nobody said it was okay. He ended up selling all those shares to people, took the money, and fled the country. Moving on to modern times. I did want to share with you guys today probably the most infamous, most well-known scandal in all of stock market history, and that is the Ponzi scheme, the giant, huge Ponzi scheme that was run by a man who was well-known on Wall Street at the time. His name was Bernie Madoff. And Bernie Madoff created a scheme in which he was able to get out of thousands of people about $50 billion. He promised them returns. Remember, that's the money you make. Okay, he promised them returns that were incredibly high. You guys know that a 10% return, remember, since 1925, stock markets on average have gone up 10%. That's considered excellent. He was promising returns of 20% and more and was delivering on it. People were actually getting that, or so they thought. Well, you may have heard this before. If you haven't, you're going to hear it now. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And it ended up being a giant Ponzi scheme. And I'll explain what this is, or I'll have somebody explain it to you a little bit later. Bernie Madoff was sentenced to 150 years in prison, and he ruined the lives of many people. This is how a Ponzi scheme works, and I'm going to save this image to talk about with you guys next time. It's also called a pyramid scheme. You can kind of see the pyramid there. But I'm going to talk about this one a little bit later, okay? I'll also have a short video in which somebody can explain it too. That's the end of our show. On to part 3.